All right, everyone, welcome back to the Maxon booth here at SIGGRAPH. Hello, interwebs. We missed you. It's been so long, all the commercials. But we're back with another amazing artist. I'm going to get rolling because I know on time we have so many more to go. But you're in for a real treat if you're into character animation, character design at all. Please, a warm welcome for Joshua Keeney.
Hi, everyone. So, my name is Joshua Keeney. I'm a 3D artist, and today I'm going to talk about how I set up fashion portraits in Cinema 4D. I want to give a special thanks to everybody at Maxon. You guys are amazing, and let's go ahead. So first things first, let's start with a reel so you guys can get a feel for my work. Go ahead and pop out of here and open up my reel.
You off of my mind. I can't get you off of my mind. I think about you all the time. I think about you all the time. I can't get you off of my mind. I can't get you off of my mind. I can't get you off of my mind.
Thank you. So, moving on. A little bit about me. Again, my name's Joshua Keeney, 3D artist. I'm based about an hour outside of Seattle. I've been a freelance 3D artist since 2015. And I do a little bit of everything. So I've done artwork for brand gigs. I used to do a lot of AR work with Snapchat. And I'm also really into 3D printing. But the primary focus of my personal work is my virtual idol character, Neptune. And my favorite thing to do is to shoot fashion portraits with her. And today, what I'm going to demo is my workflow for setting up fashion portraits. And some key points I'm going to touch on is managing skeletons. I created an interchangeable wardrobe system in Cinema 4D using native tags. I'm going to talk about how I blend stylized and realistic rendering. You can notice Neptune's the only toon-shaded character here, but everything else is realistic. You know, there are some rules you have to follow to make sure she looks grounded in the scene. And then I'm also going to go over some camera tips and how I like to set up my shots. But touching on a little bit of reference for my work, my reference is virtual idol in the classical sense with a contemporary touch. So what that means is I'm very into the history of it all, and I'm very into collecting old books. So I collect a lot of CG books from the 2000s and the late 90s, and I'm really after creating work that's evocative of this vibe. You know, it's very much about capturing the attitude, the feeling, but I don't want to create work that literally looks like this. You know, that's the contemporary touch to it. And then here's another look at my collection. This is just part of it. Very into buying all this stuff. And again, demo, setting up and rendering a fashion portrait. But I just have to touch on, since this is a quote-unquote fashion demo, I'm actually not going to be showing how I make clothing. If I'm going to be making clothing here, we'd be here all day, and you wouldn't see much cinema, actually, because I would be a marvelous designer. But if you're curious about the clothing workflow to get it to where this is, I made a little bit of a flow chart. you can see here, I start with Marvelous Designer, and then you can either use ZBrush as your starting point or go from Marvelous to ZBrush or back to back. And then I do a manual retopology from there, and then I UV unwrap that. Then I texture and bake in Substance, and then I skin it onto the character, but I make a duplicate of her skeleton. That way, with retargeting tools, I can have interchangeable clothing. And then today, for this demo specifically, we're just going to be focusing on the character setup. So, without further ado, we can go ahead and hop into Cinema. And I just have an empty scene here. First things first, I'm going to go up to my render settings, and I'm going to set it to Octane, because I am an Octane user. I'm going to go ahead and set my resolution to 4000 by 6000. I like working at a very portrait aspect ratio because, well, this is a portrait. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in my Neptune demo file, hold down Shift to merge it into the scene. Pardon the nudity. I mean, we're here to put clothing on her, so pardon that. And all I've done here is I've added an eye controller as well as an espresso tag to help with blend shapes. Because she has different parts of geometry, Neptune was made in a character creator, so she comes with blend shapes and a lot of extra bones. Right now, though, we're going to hide her skeleton. And next thing I'm going to do, we want to be able to pose her rather than working with all the individual bones. I'm going to drag in an IK skeleton that I have set up for her, hold down Shift. All this is a copy of her skeleton that I've done the manual IK tag setup on, and I've added controllers. So this is great. There's an IK skeleton, but we need to be able to retarget her onto this. So what we're going to do is, or rather I should say, if you've worked in Cinema 4D and you're familiar with retargeting, you might know the constraint tag workflow where you add tags onto every single bone. Truth be told, that takes a million years, and we're not going to do that. So what we're going to use instead is my favorite tag, which sort of facilitates my entire workflow. It's the character definition tag, and you can find that in render tags, not render, rigging tags, and character definition. And since we're going to be working with a lot of the same tag, go ahead and rename it. So I'm just going to call this IKCD. And just for organization, we're going to give this a color. Since it's blue right here for the bones, I'm going to make this blue so we can see what we're doing. And now I can open up Manager. And if you've worked with any retargeter, maybe in Unreal or something, that should be familiar. You have a list of body parts, and all you have to do is match up the bones to the right spots. So I'm going to drag in my root. Torso, you can see here, position, scale, position, rotation, scale. That's how it constrains the skeletons together. For the torso, I'm going to tick on position, and same with the hips. With the way I have my skeleton set up, I need that there. Drag in my hips. Spine bone, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Neck. And head. Now moving on to the arms. You might see this extract skeleton button and wonder, why don't I just click that? Well, I like to do things manually, and I'm picky, and sometimes if your skeleton is not named correctly, it can mess up. So just for clarity's sake, I like to go through every bone one by one. But it's easy because we only have 24 bones. I made sure to count beforehand. So again, dragging in all the bones. And this is a workflow I've done a million times, so, pretty speedy at it. But pace yourself, because this is very easy to mess up if you aren't reading the names correctly. Next thing I'm going to do is delete the fingers field, because I'm not going to be constraining fingers together. I don't have a hand rig set up, so that's fine. I can just manually pose it since this is going to be a still portrait. Next thing we're going to do is drag in the legs. Same thing for the right side. Now, this part is not very exciting because it's just me dragging bones, but stay tuned because we are going to be working with clothing, and I have this whole audience interaction bit planned, so get ready for it. Okay, we should have 24 bones. We're going to set our reference pose, which sets the 0 pose for our constraining. Go ahead and close that. I'm not going to create a solver with this tag yet because that will be on Neptune's body herself. We're going to go collapse this skeleton, and then open up Neptune's skeleton and hide the bones that we aren't going to be working with. So that's all the hand bones, the toe bones. Because Neptune was made in a character creator, she comes with all these extra bones, which are great, but we aren't going to be using them. So again, right-click on the root, go to rigging, character definition. And then again, we're going to name this, my character's name is Neptune, CD for character definition. And again, give this a color so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to go with just green because that's the default bone color. Open up the manager. Same thing as before, drag in all the bones, make sure on the torso and the hip we have position turned on so it constrains that correctly. Spine bone, 1, 2, 3, 4. Neck, you might notice this extra bone here. With the character definition tag, you can constrain together skeletons that are dissimilar, which is cool, but if your skeletons are dissimilar, I will try to solve for the extra bones. Right now, with our character having twist bones, we're not going to be using that in our IK setup, so I can go ahead and skip those. That way it doesn't solve incorrectly for our twist bones. So again, drag in all the bones, skipping the twist bones. Same thing for the right arm. And again, I like to do this manually, one by one, so I make sure I put everything in the right spot. We're going to go up to our legs now. Again, skipping the twist bones. We won't be using them in our retargeting. And again, for the right leg. And now for the toes, these are our last bones that we're adding to the character definition. And go ahead and set our reference pose, which will be our 0 for our constraining. And now I can click on Neptune's character definition tag and create a solver. And I'm going to drag in our source character, which will be our IK skeleton. And if I set this up right, there we go. Now she's moving with it, and that's what we want. We can pose her now, but we're not going to pose her just yet. Now, if you're already thinking ahead, you might realize, okay, well, I can probably use this for animation and all that kind of stuff. Yes, you can. And that's what a lot of people do, especially for motion capture. They use the character definition tag to constrain skeletons together. It's a lot faster than using the constraint tag workflow. But what I like to use it for is clothing. So I have a wardrobe file here, and these are all clothes that I've modeled and I've retopologized, and they're all rigged, but I wanted to pull you guys. So I had this idea, I have this wardrobe file, let's have a dress up moment. So I'm gonna ask you guys what type of vibe we want to dress her with. So I'm gonna go to my PowerPoint, and I'm going to go to the next slide. Do we want more of a pop vibe, or do we want more of a glamorous vibe? Raise your hand if you want pop. Keep it down if you want glam. All right, we're going pop. Next, do we want a light feeling, or do we want a moody feeling? Raise your hand if you want light. Keep it down if you want moody. Okay, it's a bit of a split. I retain executive decision making, so I'm going to go with what I feel like, but leaning in the pop direction. So go back to Cinema 4D. We're going to pick out our pieces. So we want pop. All right. I like to start with shoes because, you know, let's see here. I did not load all my textures. They are there, but they are not loading. Actually, while on the topic of textures, I have everything saved to the default text directory. So what I really should do is save my file that we're doing the demo in into that directory so we don't break any of those textures. So I'm going to back out here, go to me. See, I have my text file here. We don't want to break any of our textures when we're going to be copying stuff between projects. So we're going to save our project in here. So I'm just going to call this Prezi. Prezi for presentation. All right, going back to our wardrobe file, starting with shoes. I'm going to pick out these, well, these are leather, these leather padded boots. These are probably my favorite piece I've ever made. Go back here, paste that there. I'm going to open up the transform here and reset transformation. Okay, we have shoes. That's great. Let that load here. Next, I'm gonna go back to wardrobe. Again, we're going for a pop vibe. And it's loading. Or my middle mouse button is broken. One of those. Okay, maybe it's the Alt key. Going for a pop vibe, I'm actually going to take the dress that I had in that reference picture, this turtleneck dress. It's very mod. We can sort of play between moody and light because there was a split in how we wanted the feeling of the piece to look. But go ahead and paste this in. It's way over there. Reset our transformation. All right, now we need accessories. I don't know about you guys, but when I work on a character, I absolutely refuse to not give her earrings. That is because I made an animation once that was 20 minutes long. She had her hair in a ponytail, and I forgot to give her earrings. It was absolutely mortifying. Nobody noticed, but I did. I would, but it was 20 minutes. How am I supposed to fix it in post? All right, I'm gonna pick out these hoop earrings. Very mod, very fun. Drag that into our presentation, and I'm gonna zero the x-axis because my transform is a little wonky here. All right. Now, I have all my wardrobe pieces in. I wanna be able to retarget this on her. And I've already set up character definition tags on the clothing because this is just a copy of her skeleton. So it's going to be identical. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna click here, create a solver, and I'm gonna go to Neptune's character definition, drag that in. Same thing on the dress, create a solver, and drag Neptune in as our source character. And for the hoop earrings, these are just accessories, so I can just make this a child of the head bone and make sure it's ticked on for the viewport so we can see what we're doing. Now, if I start to move her, if I set this up correctly, you can see it's moving with her, but there's a lot of delay and it looks really bad. So what we're going to need to do is, in Cinema 4D, there is something called priority order. Objects that are at the top of the object manager will update after objects below it. So, easiest way to fix this for our clothing pieces, since we want this to update before the character moves, is to just put this at the bottom of our object manager. And now, if we set that up right, you can see it's moving with no delay. Next thing we need to do is bring in some materials. I work in Octane, so I use toon shading for her character skin. I'm gonna go to my materials and lights project here and just hold down shift to paste that in here. And now I have all her materials right here. I'm gonna press NC to switch to constant shading. That way the light isn't blowing out our viewport. And then in her material fields here, I'm just gonna drag in everything correctly. Just give me a moment. And just to show you what this looks like, this is just Octane, and it's just using the material type toon, and then I have my textures here. All I've done is just tweak the specular and roughness parameters, and for the toon, I added a custom toon ramp. That way it's not being constantly shaded and having a harsh line between lit and shadow. It's having a smooth fall off between the light and the shadow here. And then same thing with specular. I just have a little bit of fall off on it, so it's not a hard edge. All right, next thing I'm gonna do is pick out a hairstyle. I use Ornatrix as my hair plugin. So I have a bunch of hairstyles here. Which one do I think would go good with this ensemble? I'm actually gonna be a little edgy and go with this shortcut. I was doing all my run-throughs with longer hairstyles, but I'm gonna try out this short moment to see if I like it. Drag this into our project here, zero it out, and then delete the geometry that I had with it. And for the cap, I use Ornatrix, so it's a groom system, and the cap mesh is right here. I'm gonna make the cap a child of the head bone. Go down here, make it a child of the head bone. And before I render, I'm going to set up a backdrop just so we can see what we're working with. Go up to Grayscale Gorilla. I like using the Light Kit Pro Plus, Light Kit Browser Plus backdrops. So I'm just gonna find a basic one, Umbrella Basic, this is great. I'm gonna delete the default spheres that come with it, and I'm gonna delete the camera that comes with it. I'm gonna zoom out, move this light up, and then I'm going to frame this, go up to Octane, grab our live viewer window, and then dock this on the side here. Move this over. Before we click render, I'm gonna go through my settings here, set this to path tracing, samples, 512 is fine for working. Scroll down. Adaptive sampling, because Neptune is a tune shaded character, she does not need a ton of samples. She isn't, there's no subsurface scattering going on. So when the render is done with her skin, it can move on to other parts here. So I'm just gonna set this to 128 adaptive samples. And then I'm going to go to the hair, and I'm gonna turn on hair from guides. That way it turns on when we render. Move the camera over. I think the keyboard is being fussy, or no, it was just loading. It happens. All right, I'm gonna click on render. All right, so we have the character set up in the render. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go up to, hold on, give it a moment, it's updating. I'm gonna turn off geometry update. Because I'm using strand-based hair, it's very, very heavy. I don't want Octane to accidentally update and then take forever to update because the hair is on. But rather than turning the hair off right now because I wanna see, I want to look at the scene, but I don't want it to keep updating, I can just turn off geometry update up here. What I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna go to Objects, Octane Camera. Make that our active camera, and then Object. I'm gonna set my focal length. I find 60 is a good focal length when I'm working on a portrait. And then I'm gonna go over to the Octane camera tag. Thin lens, we can ignore the depth of field settings right now, but I like to always add a little bit of distortion. It just makes it feel more grounded like an actual camera. And then next, I'm gonna go to Camera Imager and tick this on. You might notice right now, compared to the artwork I showed before, our coloring looks very dull. And now, even though I do a lot of post work with coloring, I like to get my coloring pretty close to final in the actual shot. So we're gonna need a LUT, a lookup table. I'm gonna drag in my favorite LUT. And you can see here, big difference. What I'm actually gonna do right now is make our backdrop here gray so it's not blowing out the shot. All right. So we have that set up, go back to here. I'm gonna add a little vignette, and then post-processing, just a smidge of bloom, because we're just working right now. We don't wanna go for our final settings, but I just want to see a little bit of it on there so it feels like, an actual camera. All right, what I'm gonna do next is collapse the hair object here and drag this to the bottom. Again, priority order. That's what I meant to say. You get up here, you get mic'd, and you start tripping up all over your words. But that's life. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna start doing some geometry touch-ups, and instead of using the subdivision object right here, since I'm working in Octane, I'm gonna be using the Octane object tag. And if you've worked in Redshift, there's a geometry tag, and it's the same thing. So I'm gonna click all of her geometry parts. I'm gonna right-click, go to Extensions, and I'm going to Subdivision, just up 2. And then again, I have geometry off right now, geometry update. So I'm gonna turn off my hair since we won't be needing that right now. Turn geometry update back on, let it update, and then zoom in so you can see this is it smoothed right now. But if I go here and zero that, it's not bad. And if I'm working in real time, this is actually, I'm gonna be honest, this is overkill for real time. But since we're offline, we can go crazy and add a ton of subdivisions. Not really. You don't want to do that. You're going to fry your GPU. But just for tune shading, that way we have some smooth lines, I'm going to turn on subdivision there. Next, on the clothing itself, I think I already set up some subdivision on here. Nope, I actually think I made this really dense. That's really dense for me. So I didn't give that subdivision, that's fine. The boots, I don't think the boots need subdivision either, actually. So we can do some material touch-ups. I'm actually not feeling this red color, so I'm gonna go into the material here and make this. I have a color correction node already here, and then I have the texture feeding into that. I'm gonna make this, are we feeling orange or yellow? Yellow, raise your hand, orange, keep it down. Wait, which one did I say? I already forgot. Yellow? Okay, you said yellow first. I'm gonna turn down the saturation a little bit. I actually don't work much with yellows because her skin is already very tan, so it kind of looks a little wonky if the shot isn't right, but I'm playing around with it. I wanna be a bit more fun with my colors. I've been in a very moody phase. I've been very into like Tom Ford Gucci lately, so the colors have been very moody, the palettes have been moody, but right now I think the pendulum is swinging again, and I'm starting to go light. I'm gonna make these earrings white. And same thing with the boots, I'm gonna make the boots white. And for that, I'm just gonna take down our saturation and bump the gamma a little bit. All right, we're going for a very mod look, it seems. And then I'm curious what it looks like with the hair. We're gonna turn the hair on. All right, what are we feeling about this? This is your last chance before I can change any of these pieces. Can we get some yays, some woos? All right, so we're feeling the ensemble. All right, I can go ahead and turn off the render now. Now, this is where I would pose her, but since this is a demo and we only have an hour, I am not going to pose her manually. I know at the beginning of the demo I set up the IK system, but that was just really to show you guys character definition. I'm gonna go into my file here where I have a bunch of poses already set up. I think I'm gonna go with this one that I already have selected. This is like my go-to starter pose. Copy it, bring it into our Prezi file, give it a moment to load, zero out the transform, delete the geometry that comes with it because we won't be working with that, and expand out the children here. I'm gonna go to Neptune's character solver here and take off our IK skeleton that we set up at the beginning. Go ahead and delete that. Then I'm gonna go back to our solver and drag in our new IK as our pose, as our source character. And since all our skeletons are the same, I've designed everything for this character. She snaps to the pose right away. What I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna turn the render back on. Give it a moment. Again, working with strand hair, it's very heavy. I use Ornatrix as my plugin. That's my favorite plugin. All right, so I'm gonna frame the shot now. We're working at 60. I'm thinking maybe something straight on. All right, I'm gonna turn off camera update now. So what this lets me do is I can go back to the default camera here without messing it up. I'm gonna scroll down here, first tick on geometry update. I'm gonna turn off her hair again since we're gonna be posing her. Turn off her hair, and now we can move her geometry without it messing up the camera, and we can swing around here and get really nitty-gritty with our posing. So, I wanted a front-on shot. That's good. Move the eye controller. Maybe instead of her looking front-on, we can, whoops, that's an extra controller. We can have her looking to the side. Very moody. Again, we're sort of balancing the light and the pop and the moody, just creating a cool shot. All right. And again, I didn't set up a hand rig, so we're gonna be posing her fingers manually. That's okay, it only takes a minute. But also, again, just to reiterate, this is an IK rig that I set up myself. There are a lot of plugins for setting up IK on characters, but I like to do it manually. The Maxon tutorials that they have on their YouTube channel are really good for explaining all the rigging tools in Cinema 4D in depth. I am not that great at rigging, to be honest, but I can hold my weight. That was a joke, by the way. All right, I'm gonna move the elbow in a little bit, sort of framing the shot. Her posture's fine. I always like to pay attention to the posture. I don't like it when, you set up a shot and then you start posing your character from that framing. It's very easy to get a wonky posture. And I know a lot of people talk about, what's in the shot matters, but just for that extra little bit of grounding in realism, despite working with a non-realistic character, I like her posture to be correct. So it looks like she can actually stand like this, which is, that's what we want. I'm going to bump her up a little bit. That way she isn't clipping into the ground. Fix her feet. And then this is just nitty-gritty posing manually. I could spend hours on this, but we wouldn't have time for everything else. And then I'm going to put the knees angled inwards. That one inwards, maybe this one out. And then the shoulder, I like to create a lot of lines in the body. I don't like it when it looks flat like this. Move the shoulder a bit. Maybe down here and then up on this side. And then I think the issue right here is because I have the hips pivoted, but I have the first spine bone doing such a heavy movement in the other direction. I need to move this a bit more and then have more twist in the abdomen. And again, checking from all angles, make sure we're not giving her a posture that looks really bad. I'm sure you've all seen those comic books where it's the characters are like drawn crazy and then somebody would compare that to like actual human anatomy and it looks horrible. You can do that, but I like my posing to be grounded. Keep saying that. All right. And then just to be coy, I'm going to hide her other hand behind her so we won't have to pose those fingers. So I'm going to go back to her skeleton. This is her right hand. And then I'm posing the bones one by one. I didn't set up a hand rig. For portraits like these, I do think that is overkill, but if I was doing an animation, yeah, I would be crazy not to give her a hand rig. But for just a neutral pose, takes like a moment. Whoops. All right, check it from this side. Move those in a little bit. I don't like my hands being spread wide. I like a very, soft pose like that. Pose that there. And then move these bones a little bit. Don't have to do a lot, just a little bit of bend. All right, I think I moved this one way too much. Put that down. All right, adjust the hand a little bit now. I actually quite like that, a little bit of hand out. I feel like that's very fun. Straighten the arm. All right, now we can go ahead and turn the hair back on, just to see what this looks like. Give it a moment. Turn off geometry update. Now, because this is a short hairstyle, I don't have to do any adjustments, which is great. When I was demoing this with the long hairstyle, I would have to adjust it. And because I'm brushing this all by hand, there's no simulation. So, short hairstyle, that's great. I don't have to do any movement. What I can do now, though, is turn that back off, turn geometry update back on. I need to adjust her earrings, so there's a sense of gravity to it. These details matter. I always like to imagine things being sort of blown by a fan, a little bit of a diva fan in front of her. All right, turn the hair back on, give it a moment. let me change the backdrop color since we're working with yellow. I don't want it to be mustard, and I don't want it to be pastel, but just a nice yellow. Maybe bump up the saturation a bit. Now, I actually really like this as a shot, but since we do have time, I can go ahead and bring in a backdrop that I've made. Let me turn off the render, go over to my project folder. Let's go with the ferry. I'm from Washington State again, so I really love taking the ferries to Seattle. And this is just a camera map shot I did in Cinema 4D. And I have a placeholder here. I'm gonna go back to our presentation over here. Give it a moment to load. And I'm just gonna copy everything and bring that over to this scene. Let it load. And now I've already lit this scene and everything. So what we can do is go to her root controller right here, drag her to where the placeholder is. Make sure she isn't clipping into the ground. And then back out here, go up to our camera. I'm gonna go with our portrait camera. Adjust her a little bit because I designed her pose for this camera right here, but this camera is a little bit different. Rotate that out. Something sort of like that. I can go to where our placeholder is and delete our placeholder in the shot. What did I delete? I deleted something. Oh, I deleted all the materials on accident. No, I meant to delete this. Sorry. All right. Let's go ahead and turn that on. All right. So this is sort of, again, balancing that moody and pop look that I was having you guys sort of pick what we wanted. And of course, our hair broke right here. So I can click on the side here to maybe it will refresh and fix itself. If not, I'll start the render over again. Or actually, I can just take that off, take that back on, give it a moment. Sometimes it's finicky. That's why I've been turning geometry update on and off. That way, I won't mess up this. So I really like this, but I want to play with the lighting a little bit. So I was going to talk about how I sort of ground toon-shaded characters in a very realistic scene. And of course, this is realistic because it's literally a photo I took on my iPhone that I just camera mapped. The key to grounding characters that are, shaded like this into a realistic scene, it's really all about your light direction. You want to make sure your toon lights are coming from the same direction as your scene lights. And, it's okay if everything in your realistic rendering is a little bit more scattered, a little bit more soft, as long as you have one solid shadow coming in one direction and your toon lights are following that, it'll look grounded in your scene. So I'm going to go. I'm actually not liking some of my realistic lighting here. I can select this one, maybe move it over, maybe make this shot a little bit brighter. Or get more contrasty shadows, but, making the backdrop brighter. All right. Something sort of like that. And you can see we got a lot of good reflection on the belt right here. These are all, again, clothes that I've modeled myself in Marvelous Designer. Then I do a manual retopology on it. And then I do all my materials in Substance Painter. The weighting is a little bit wonky right here. I can turn the hair off because we're going to be working with geometry. Turn geometry update back on. Go to our default camera, which we already are. Find the dress here, and then I'm going to go up to the character weight tool, and I just want to smooth this out. Okay, and that's all it needed. It just needed a little bit of smoothing. So go back to portrait camera, and then turn the hair. No, I'm going to adjust the pose a little bit more because I'm not feeling this for this shot. It looked great in the other shot, but maybe not here. I want something maybe a bit more angular, sort of like she's looking. It's a very dynamic shot. Sort of an action-y kind of moment. Maybe take the hand out a little bit more. And again, this is just sort of like the minutia that I can spend hours on at home, but I have to condense for a demo, because if it was up to me, I'd be here all day just posing characters, right? That's really fun. I'm going to go to her pose morph tag now and give her a little bit of an expression. So again, she has a ton of different geometry pieces, and they all have pose morph tags, pose morphs, blend shapes, same thing. And I have an espresso tag on here to make sure that they all sync up together. So I'm going to go to her pose morph. I don't have a controller set up for this, so I'm just going to go through the list manually. All I want to add is a little bit of eye. Make this it's very fun. It's very moody. It's a little bit mod. I'm going to fix that little bit of geometry that's clipping right there in a moment. Let's see, where is eye squint? There it is. Tack that on a little bit. And then I'm going to add a little bit of mouth funnel. And then mouth pucker. That's a little much. It looks a little extra right here. But again, some of these, they make for nice poses, or, but use them in moderation. Even though I'm doing it manually this way with the list, this is not the ideal way to do it. You'd want to set up a controller for all your pose morphs, but just for a portrait right here, that's fine. Right. I'm going to adjust her eyes, bring those back up. Okay. And I said I was going to fix that little bit of geometry right there. I can just select this, go over to, where is it? Face mode. It's right here. It's in wireframe. I hope this is the front. Let's see. Yep, that's the front. I'm going to click this one. I'm going to press E to go to move, soft select, enable, set this to surface, and then change our radius to about 8. And then give it a little bit of a bump so it isn't clipping there. My skinning isn't perfect on this, but it's workable for what we need. And then I'm going to go now, click off of that, go back to object mode, turn the hair back on. I lied, we're going to give the hair a little bit of movement because I think that's fun. I'm going to turn off geometry update because we don't want it to update while we're moving the hair. Turn hair from guides off. Again, working in Ornatrix, it's my favorite plugin. Not sponsored, but I just really like them. Click on our brush, effects selected only. Change our radius a little bit. Just bump it out. And then we're just eyeballing it right here in the viewport because we are not updating the geometry right now. So just bump this out a little bit so we can get a bit of movement. Same thing on the other side. We only want a little bit of movement. All right. So I'm going to go over to the smooth tool now and just smooth everything out. Click off of that, click on hair from guides. Give it a moment. And then we're going to click geometry update again. And it should give us a little bit of movement to the shot. That's really fun. So I really like that for just a little bit of hair movement, make this a really dynamic shot. Gonna turn off geometry update here. I'm kind of going all over the place because this is how I like to work at home. I never focus on one component to the other. I'm working in materials, I'm working on hair, I'm working on posing, all at the same time because they all influence each other. So that's how I like to get my shots. So I'm going to go back to our material for this dress here. I'm going to play with the colors. I desaturated it a bit I'm gonna bring that back up, bring in some more color. That's a little much. All right, I think I like that. I'm gonna go work on the camera now. So our portrait camera here, I'm gonna take the focal length back quite a lot. And since this is a camera map shot, let me turn on camera update here, just a moment. Since this is a camera map shot, I can't really move the camera around in the scene, so I'm using the film offset parameters here to just move it around. This was shot on the Washington State ferries. I'm from Seattle, so I love taking the ferries. We can do that here. And you can see here, again, working with a toon shaded character in a realistic scene, we really want all of our lighting coming from the same direction. That way the shadows are on one side and she's being lit from the other. And if you look at the ground here, there's some of that shadows here. Now, I'm gonna be honest, when I was picking our backdrop and our outfit, I did not anticipate this. So there is a bit of clashing going on, but I'm not gonna address that because I think I really like the contrast. You know, a lot of what I do is about the contrast. I like that. That's why I have realistic backdrop, realistic hair. But the character itself is toon shaded, and that's what I like. But we're going for a very mod moment. I think I'm gonna play with some of the camera parameters here. Maybe take up the bloom. No. Take up the vignette a little bit. Set up our depth of field, click on our focus. We want it to be on the character. And then go over to camera here. I have this in universal. I'm gonna switch it back to thin lens. Why I had it in universal, I really wanted some more of that intense distortion control. I really like a lot of distortion in my shot. I'll even add extra in post because it just makes it feel more grounded, like it's an actual camera. Camera lenses aren't flat. So I like that. Go to our depth of field here. We have our focal depth set. I'm gonna take our aperture, or actually, not gonna adjust it in aperture. I'm gonna go up to our f-stop here and maybe set it to about 2. I don't wanna blur the background too much. Maybe set it back to 4. But I want a little bit of blurring. I'm gonna go to the material again on the boots, make this a bit more specular. I may actually have it already as specular as it can be with the way I have my texture set up. It is what it is, maybe roughness. Bring that out a little bit. Yeah, that's fine. All right. So this is about where I would call it a finished shot, you know. But if I was on my own, I'd be here for hours, days even, just adjusting it, tweaking it, trying to get it right. Everything from the pose, the framing, the hair, the ensemble. It all relates to each other, you know. Even though today in this demo I showed it, you know, very one by one, sort of constructing it, for me, I work on all of these different things all at the same time because they all influence each other. And to me, that's really important. But this is about where I'm gonna be calling it a shot right here. And then let me turn that off. So again, I am working in Octane. I am just using path tracing, really low sample count. Again, that's the benefit of working with toon shading, is that you don't need a lot of samples. Granted, the hair is really realistic. The clothing is really realistic. But, you know, comparatively, don't need a lot of samples either. And yeah, this is about where I would call it a shot. Matthias is busy right now, so I'm not sure we can go straight to Q&A. But if you guys are interested in my work and you want to find me online, let me go over to the PowerPoint. Thank you guys for being here. You can find me online at my website if you just want to see my work, 550am.net. Send me an email. I love to chat. And then I'm on Twitter until the wheels fall off. And then I'm also on Instagram if you want to see like my work just there. So thank you.
All right, another big round of applause for Joshua. Nice job on timing. Nailed it like a pro.
I practiced.
True pros practice, folks. All right, questions. We do have some time, luckily, for some questions. If not, Joshua will be down the aisle at the Dell booth where you can go over some of the techniques they used in their presentation or anything else. Maybe just talk fashion.
Thank you.
Talk some stuff. Any questions, just raise a hand, shout it out. All right, questions. All right, well, you have all the social medias, so make sure to connect there, and that's another way to connect. If not, stay tuned. We're going to be up with our next presenter shortly. So stay tuned after this quick commercial break, and we'll be back.